Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast episode 32. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa. And in this podcast, I will share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. Why this podcast? Because I am sick and tired of Africa being the poorest continent in the world. We are blessed with the world's greatest resource, young people. Africa will soon have the largest number of working age people in the world. And when these people achieve success, Africa's wealth will be unparalleled. Why? Because I don't know of too many Africans whose goal in life it is to die poor. You see, success in life is simply the achievement of a predetermined goal. Whether that goal is owning a house and a car, or creating employment for 1,000 people, or transforming your country into a non-corrupt country, this podcast has been created to help you to achieve it. So if you are serious about achieving success in Africa, I want you to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video after you've watched it, please click the like button. This podcast is brought to you courtesy of BCA Leadership, the largest leadership enhancement company in Africa. If you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online, the link is on the screen, and post your questions there. That is where I will respond to your questions. Today we are continuing our 5-part series on great employees. 5 C's of great employees. And these 5 C's are calling, character, chemistry, culture, and competence. Calling, character, chemistry, culture, and competence. Last week we explored the first of the C's, calling. If you missed last week's episode, I suggest that after you've finished listening to this podcast, you find last week's episode and listen to it as well. Today, we will be taking on the second of the 5 C's, and that is character. Character is a combination of integrity and courage, and sadly, it is rare to find in some parts of Africa. The importance of character and how it makes for a great employee can best be illustrated in the story of Martin Kalungu-Banda of Zambia, whose integrity and courage enabled him to become an acting managing director of BP Zambia, a chief of staff to the 3rd president of the Republic of Zambia, and a coach to other African chiefs of staff. Not bad for a man born in a small village in northern Zambia. Martin Kalungu-Banda's father was a primary school teacher, and he started teaching Martin how to read and write and do arithmetic well before Martin was enrolled in school. This head start that he received helped him to excel in school, and by the time Martin was old enough to go to secondary school, his father decided that the academic rigor and discipline of a Catholic secondary school would be good for young Martin. Little did he know how much it would shape Martin's character and make it one of integrity and courage. At Catholic school, discipline was the order of the day. The teachers and administrators were disciplined and hard. The routine was study, manual work, sports, prayer. Every day. Study, manual work, sports, prayer. When it was a sports day, you didn't say, oh, I can't play basketball. No. You were allocated. You were assigned to a team and a sport to play. And you had to play. The rotation happened every week. So you move from basketball to football to volleyball to track and field, etc. And the cycle just went like that. Sports captains were not permitted to listen to any students complaining. Martin learned discipline. There was no choice about morning prayer or evening prayer. Each student was also expected to keep a vegetable garden, and there were no janitors to clean the toilets. They cleaned their own toilets and their classes, and they learned how to keep their places clean. The standards were so high that every single one of the students that was at that secondary school got acceptance into university. That was a record in Zambia. For Martin, though, he was not just accepted into university, he also received acceptance into the Catholic priesthood seminary. And he chose to go to seminary over going to university. He went through 5 years of studying divinity and Bible studies in the seminary. A year before his scheduled completion of the seminary and what would then have been his ordination, Martin started to feel like he was just not going to be ready for ordination, and he may never be ready for the life of being a priest. But he was afraid. He was afraid to bring it up to his superiors for fear of letting them down and disappointing his parents. You see, Martin's acceptance into a seminary was a big deal with his village community where his parents lived. But one day, Martin's spiritual director at the seminary said to him, he said, "Martin, I have something to say to you, and I hope you understand the spirit in which I am sharing this. I sense that you are having doubts of going through ordination, and I'm glad that you are, because I think your world is out there and not in the priesthood." Martin got upset. The priest then told him, he said, "Martin, please don't get upset. I think you can be a good priest, but I see another world out there for you. And to show you that I'm not just bluffing, I'm going to use money that my parents left for me in their will to fund your university study when you leave the seminary." Wow. Martin slowly came to the conclusion that he needed to leave. After he informed his professors that he was leaving the seminary, he broke the news to his parents. They were disappointed. He sought and received their permission to move to the city and live with his older brother, and he started attending university. See, these decisions were not really understood by his parents, but he had summoned the courage to make them. His university studies were successful, and by the time he was ready to graduate, Martin had already been offered a job at the university to be a lecturer. His integrity and his courage made him quickly noticeable wherever he worked. Later on, he became the assistant principal clerk at the National Parliament, and one time while he was there, he asked his boss, "Why do the men not get paternity leave?" The boss said, "Are you crazy?" Then Martin explained himself, and his boss said, "Okay, well, if you feel that way, write a concept note." He did. The concept note was submitted. It sparked discussion and debate, and eventually was accepted, and the practice was changed. Martin was also instrumental in creating an unexplained day off for women so that they did not have to explain when they took time off, especially for their menstrual cycles. When he later on applied for a job at BP Zambia, the managing director of BP Zambia at the time was initially unimpressed by his apparent low charisma. But weeks after being hired as the corporate affairs manager, the MD approached Martin and asked him a simple question. He says, "Are you happy here?" Now, Martin could have said what most other Zambians would have said, which is, "Yes, of course, sir." After all, a job with BP Zambia was a very, very coveted position, and it paid really, really well. But instead he said that while he honestly loved the perks, he missed the students and the learning materials that he had left behind at the university to work at BP Zambia. And he said he felt guilty that in his absence, one of the most critical courses, a course called Business Ethics, which Martin used to teach, was no longer being offered due to the lack of a competent lecturer. So Martin asked the MD for permission. He said, "Sir, I would like to continue to teach this course at the university, and I would be willing to do it pro bono. And it could be BP's contribution to the university." Another courageous decision to speak. The MD, to Martin's surprise, said, "You know what? Tell you what, if you can get the Vice Chancellor of the university to sign an MOU with BP Zambia that describes this, as a corporate social responsibility act, and participate in a joint press conference to announce it, I'll let you do it." Martin achieved it. You see, the MD later on respected Martin's courage and integrity so much that when he went on vacation, out of all of his other top executives, he chose Martin to be the acting managing director in his absence. Martin's demonstration of character did not go unnoticed, even in the public sector in Zambia. In 2005, the third president of Zambia, President Mwanawasa, appointed Martin to the position equivalent of Chief of Staff at the office of the president. Martin suddenly found himself catapulted into halls of power that he had never, ever imagined he would be in. In his new position, he could summon the governor of the central bank with just a phone call, or an ambassador or a minister of state. Thankfully, his early training in self-discipline did not allow this power to go to his head. He was polite, and he listened a lot, and he summoned the courage to push back on the president whenever there were ideas that he did not believe were optimal. The president respected the fact that Martin would speak his mind and do it respectfully, and he trusted Martin because Martin would always tell him whatever he was thinking rather than what he thought the president wanted to hear. In fact, one time he asked Martin, he said, "Why don't other people do the same as you?" Martin replied to him, he said, "Sir, to be able to speak with an honest mind to powerful people, a person needs another source. Sir, I spend time in prayer and in silence. I cannot face you and the challenges of the office if I come to this office every day as just Martin. I am too small, too frail. When I tap into God, He gives me an inner strength to be able to say the honest things. I feel very small when I look at you and in this office, and I have to connect to my source in order to speak truth to your power." Amazing. Martin served President Mwanawasa until he became medically incapacitated shortly before the president's untimely death. Today, Martin is a leadership teacher, an author, and advisor to chiefs of staff. His demonstrations of integrity and courage and self-discipline have earned him the admiration and trust of many people who lean on him for wise counsel. It's not a coincidence that the third president of Zambia is best known for his success in reducing corruption in Zambia. Even though Martin would never take credit for making this happen, I know that it must have been helpful for President Mwanawasa to have a chief of staff with a reputation for integrity and the courage to speak truth to power in order for that president to achieve that which few other heads of state have ever done in Africa. For a few years, the government of Zambia benefited from having a key employee with character. This brings us to the end of our podcast today. Next week, we will continue with our series on the 5 C's of a great employee. We have gone over character today. Last week, we went over calling. Tune in next week so that you will learn more about the C's of a great employee. Thank you so much for listening or watching. I hope you've learned something useful. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Tell your friends about it, because together we can transform our beloved continent. See you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.